more and more, we're seeing surveys saying that attorneys are frustrated because they're having to do more and more admin tasks than they used to. And even with automation of some tasks, uh, I honestly don't think that we're there yet with automation enough that you can just wholesale get rid of the role of the legal secretary.
Has tech made traditional legal assistants and secretaries obsolete? Do you think your firm can slash costs and improve productivity by letting that support staff go? Not so fast. Law firms are laying off their support staff at an alarming rate, thinking that automation is going to improve their service and efficiency. The big problem is that automation infrastructure isn't really there yet. My guest this week is Michelle Spencer, the product marketing manager at NetDocuments, a leading document management tool. She's a huge believer in both the power of automation and the value of a great legal assistant. Michelle and I are going to discuss the evolving role of non-lawyers in the law firm. Now, if you've been listening to this show for any length of time, you know we frequently talk about humanizing our use of tech as it comes to service. In this episode, we're going to focus on how traditional legal assistants can still function well with a high lawyer-to-assistant ratio. How? By both humanizing the tech while still automating the human functions. There are still so many client communication and air traffic control tasks that are best suited for a real-life human assistant, and we'll explain why. Let's start the show. I'm John Strohmeyer, and this is the 5-Star Counsel Podcast. The market for legal services is shifting, and lawyers who don't adapt will be left behind. This podcast gives you a competitive edge in today's market by sharing the client service lessons you probably didn't learn in law school or in law practice. Let's start the show. Hey 5-Star listeners, before we start, I want to tell you about our amazing sponsor, Smith AI. Smith AI is a virtual receptionist service for small businesses with a specialty in working with solo and small law firms. I signed up with them within weeks of starting my firm because they are affordable for even the smallest solo practice. Their friendly receptionists respond to potential clients in Spanish or English, screen and schedule new leads, and can even take payments. And now they're answering calls 24 hours a day. So even when you're asleep, they're still working. Even beyond the phone, they've got live agents and chatbots ready to capture leads on your website, by text, and by Facebook Messenger. Smith's friendly gatekeepers can staff your front line so you can work uninterrupted. You can finally have the peace of mind that while you're working, you're not missing out on future work. Plans start at just $70 a month for calls and $100 a month for chats. Smith AI is offering a free trial, and our podcast listeners get an extra $100 discount code with promo code 5-STAR. That's FIVESTAR. Sign up and learn more at www.smith.ai. Don't let another day go by. Try Smith AI. Hey, Michelle, it is great to have you on the podcast today.
Glad to be here, John. Good to talk to you.
Oh, Michelle, it is always great to talk to you. We met years ago through former guest Mike Whalen and his Lawyer Forward conference. But today we're not talking about Mike as much as that would stroke his ego, and he would appreciate that.
Yes, it would.
We are talking about, well, we spent a lot of time on this podcast talking about what lawyers should be doing. The reality is it's not just lawyers in a law firm. There are other people in that firm. And it's not just lawyers' roles who need to evolve. It's everybody else in the firm who is and really must be committed to evolving what they do and how they do it. Not only to survive in a law firm, but really just to survive in this planet in 2021 and beyond. So we're going to start figuring out, well, what does that look like? What is developing talent within when it comes to services, and how can we get a better, more consistent delivery of our service? So with that long winding intro, Michelle, where are we going first?
So it's been interesting over the last couple of years because obviously we're now working in completely different ways than we were. And as a result, it has identified some shortcomings, I think, in people's skill sets. I heard stories even of people who didn't have internet access at home as people started working from home. So shocker there, right? And As a result, there has been a continuing trend that started last fall. It looks like a lot of firms have hired consultants to look at the way that they're doing things, and they are now dropping staff in big chunks.
And that's a thing where that staff is on the hook as much as the attorneys. I mean, it makes me think of when you mentioned that folks didn't have internet at home, thinking back when at a former firm, I knew there was one partner who, once he got home, the internet or the emails from him wouldn't come from the work email. It was coming from other addresses within the house. And it's like, but how is this not something you can deal with? Here we are years later. This is something to really, you're going to have to embrace it because this is the reality for now.
Right. I think, yes, the traditional role of support staff and legal secretaries has changed, but more and more, we're seeing surveys saying that attorneys are frustrated because they're having to do more and more admin tasks than they used to. And even with automation of some tasks, uh, I honestly don't think that we're there yet with automation enough that you can just wholesale get rid of the role of the legal secretary.
Right, because you still want somebody to take a look at something just to make sure it is the words are roughly in the right place and not offload all of that back on the attorney. So what sort of things are we thinking about that need to stay off the attorney's plate for now?
So, specifically, attorneys are mentioning administrative tasks, but I honestly think, having been a legal secretary a very long time ago and paralegal, that there is a lot that secretaries could be doing to take burdens off of attorneys, even in the legal work that they're doing. Um, I used to set up all of the shell pleadings for my attorneys, for example. Um, there's handling traffic, so kind of being the and one firm actually used this term, the air traffic controller, but they used it as delegating work on behalf of practice groups, but I used to do that with clients, and so specifically to the point of this podcast, servicing the client. So clients want updates. Um, Clients need help when attorneys are in closings or in court or in, lengthy hearings. And so I was kind of that traffic controller. I responded to emails on behalf of my attorneys, which I know some firms actually have policies where they don't want attorneys sharing their emails with their assistants any longer, which I find very interesting.
That is crazy. I mean, I'm gonna pick my jaw up off the floor for a minute, but then I want to go back to the concept of the air traffic controller because I think that is something that we want to start looking at in terms of non-traditional roles, even if you actually have somebody who's has a similar job, but just the thought that it's not an attorney who's necessarily monitoring everything, it's somebody else who's looking at all the business and what do we have to think about, what needs to get done.
So there seems to be two lines of thinking with the firms that have reduced their staff. And one is that they're going to create more of an executive assistant role. And so that goes to kind of the air traffic controller. And then others have said that they want people in roles that are more highly technically skilled. And some of this reasoning behind getting rid of some of the existing staff was that their skills, their technical chops were not up to snuff with where they needed to be for today.
Right. And so I guess let's start with the executive assistant, air traffic controller, maybe even a case manager.
Hmm.
What sort of things are we going to have to train up staff or basically expect from staff if they're going to do well in this sort of role?
Here's what I think that any traditional legal secretary should already have those skills to do that. Some of them mentioned, some of the firms mentioned time management, improving communication, um, using all of the tools to kind of facilitate um, the day-to-day practice with more remote work. They also mentioned team building and customer service as well. And it kind of made me chuckle because those are all of the things that traditional legal secretaries, I think, have done.
Right. And so if it's almost like if you want to stay where you have been, you're keeping that executive assistant in place to do what they've always been doing.
Right. Except that they talked about the fact, of course, that there are less admin functions than before. So things like opening mail, making travel arrangements, um, things like that. They talked about that. Some of them talked about that they would do some of those things. A lot of them talked about that those things were gone away. And I'm like, I don't think so. Attorneys are still going to be traveling, maybe not as much. Um, and yes, they're probably entering their own time, but billing and expense management, secretaries always did a lot of that.
Right. And so it's a matter of figuring out, well, what can we do? But if everybody's getting their staff cut, efficiency is going to be something that we're going to have to think about then.
Right. And I was a business major in college, and business 101 is that you give the task to the lowest person on the totem pole that can do it well. And in my mind, that's your secretary.
Right. And so making sure that they know how to do all of this is, I mean, again, it's going to come back to training. And how do we get them ready to go on all of these things to be better able to deliver in 2021?
I think a lot of it is upskilling them in the technologies that are being used. But I worry that firms are making assumptions,
Such as,
and they're assuming that a lot of this work wasn't being done. And so I go back to the fact that we went from staffing ratios of 3 attorneys to 1 legal assistant to 6 or 7 to 1. And that's why these attorneys are feeling overburdened with admin tasks. Also, a big part of what happened with that was that the associate attorneys didn't have secretarial support because those secretaries could only support partners because rank and file they got the most time from that assistant. And so I feel like there is maybe a little bit of a gap of associates who never learned what all an assistant could do for them to make them more efficient.
right. And so then what sort of tasks should we be making sure that these executive assistants are capable of doing and doing efficiently if they're going to have a 5 or 6 attorney plate in front of them?
I think that that's what it has been. Previously, it was 6 to 7 to 1. And so now, if we're laying off large swaths of assistants, you're talking 10 or 12 maybe to 1. And so I really think that firms are going to have to pick and choose what they want those folks to focus on. And so are we going to create 2 roles? One is the executive assistant, kind of air traffic controller, and then maybe the other is a document specialist who is helping work on the case side of things.
Right.
And so then they're going to need to learn, all of the document automation tools that are out there, the workflow automation tools, and all of those things.
Yeah, and when I think about this in the context of service, we want to make sure that we're being consistent. And if we're going to have assistants who have 10 or more lawyers on their plate, that means you're lucky if you're getting 3 hours a week out of this person when they're focused on you. So half an hour a day to do everything they could for you. Or can you make yourself stand out? And can we start thinking about some of the bigger tools out there that are going to drive better consistency and a better service delivery for the firms, for the employees, and for the clients?
Yeah, and my concern is that, you know, lawyers have always expected high touch support. And I wonder if they're going to be able to have that. And there was actually an interesting debate when one of the articles came out on Twitter with talking about whether then the attorney could expect for that person to schedule a personal appointment, for example, um, and talked about that originally that role was designed to reduce cognitive load and the time attention burden on attorneys. And are they now going to be able to do as much of that or not?
And it makes me think then, well, the tools are out there and it doesn't even require somebody totally separate to deal with this. But well, if we're going to, you know, think about this quickly and easily, if we've got to schedule a 10-minute call with somebody, sure, you could outsource this to the executive assistant, or we could develop some skills around, text expander and Calendly, and 10
Exactly.
seconds later, even though it's coming back to the attorney to do it, or maybe even the assistant who's got at best half an hour, it's not taking them the time to type out this and that. They're doing it in a few keystrokes and moving on to the next thing.
Right. And so I do think that those levels of automation are there. I just think that maybe the higher levels of automation for some things, like putting out the legal work, maybe are not there yet. Like, for example, getting a document or a package of documents put together and ready to electronically file.
Right. So what if we're not there yet? What can we do to start getting us closer to being there?
I think that the firm needs to really decide what that role is exactly going to look like. Is it going to be more of an executive assistant or IT or a blend of both? And then what tools are we going to use? Um, and how we're going to handle that workflow. Because I think, a lot of firms are talking about putting these people in pools and having, requests come into the entire pool, in which case you're going to have people who may have had specialized skills in transactional work that is very different than litigation work. And so you're going to have to figure out what those skill gaps are that need to be covered.
And once we've figured those out, what have you seen things that work better in terms of training staff to get better at particular technologies?
Repetition, repetition, repetition. And we've had to switch from most firms did a lot of their training in person, and now, of course, it's all remote. And so figuring out, I can't take cues from you that show me whether you're understanding something or not as well. And so we're going to have to get really good at assessing those things. There are, quite a few tools out there now to do that. There are performance support tools, and those I think are going to be particularly effective. Those are the in application tools that you can say, "Show me how to do this," and it literally walks you through it. And so I
So,
think that's going to be critical.
so that's more, it's more than just the help button to figure
Right.
something out.
Yes, exactly. Because the help button only gets you so far. you know, it can show you some steps, but it's not going to fill in, some of the gaps of what to watch out for and, things like that that you get over time from using software.
Right. And so when you think about this, there's a long way to go, but certainly there've got to be some things that you're looking, more than just the slog of teaching people to do this. What are you excited about when you look forward to how staff are developing?
I'm really excited about the fact that we actually have tools to modernize learning and make it more accessible across the board. Like I said, I think the performance support tools that we have available to us now, where I don't have to drag somebody away from the work, they're actually learning in the course of doing the work. And that is pretty exciting to me. I'm excited about document automation technologies and workflow automation technologies that are out there. I think that there is a lot of work that's going to have to go into those tools to make them efficient for people because you can have a great tool, but it has to know what you want it to do, right? So Zapier has some built-in capabilities, but if I want things specific to me and the tools I'm using, I have to create those. And so I don't see a lot of lawyers slowing down enough or having the time to create a lot of that. And that's where I think your support staff roles, your uh, assistants, your paralegals, and those folks are going to be really helpful in doing that. And I think if we let them all go, then we've made a critical mistake.
Yeah, the pitfall is not cutting staff, it's not supporting staff in getting better to basically help save their job.
Right. Right. And helping them move the firm forward with these automation tools that are coming out, because the attorney's not going to have time to sit and train, you know, this workflow and figure out exactly what all of the steps are. I've done a lot of that with practice groups, and it takes a lot of time, because you do one pass and you figure out the first 5 steps, and then you go back and you go, "Wait, there's some gaps here." And so you have to do another pass and identify the next set, to fill in the gaps. And then you have to test it. So you have to have somebody to try it and see whether it's going to work or not, and then do further iterations.
Yeah, the thought that you're going to be one and done on any of this is a myth at best.
Right. Meanwhile, your attorneys, hours they're working are going up, their billable realized hours are going down, and clients aren't getting the service they need because law firm clients expect white glove service.
Right. And how are we, this is how we've got to speed up and still retain that consistency so they know we've taken care of them.
Right. Exactly.
Well, Michelle, I think this is probably as good a place as any to land the plane for now. Where can our listeners find you if they are looking for more?
I am a product marketing manager at NetDocuments, so they can find me there on LinkedIn. They can find me at TX Mischief on Twitter. All the places.
All the places. Michelle, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. Enjoyed talking to you.
Thanks so much for listening. You can find more info on us and get your free white paper on client service at 5starcouncil.com. You can get in touch with me at john@fivestarcouncil.com. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe wherever fine podcasts are found and leave us a review wherever you can.